so let me go ahead and introduce everyone. Next slide. So we have Olivia Georgieff, who is just finished the program on Friday. Congratulations, Olivia. MAT candidate of 2021, elementary teacher at Martin Elementary School. We have Julie Klinkenberg, who is a grade 4 teacher at Anaheim Elementary Online Academy. And she was a mentor teacher this year for UCI and was working with Olivia. And Laura Gold, who is a lecturer and supervisor at UCI and also Sonoma State. And Dr. Evelyn Young, who is a lecturer and supervisor at UCI, and who is currently having trouble connecting because she's on I think a college trip with her daughter, and so she's trying to connect from, I forget which university, but she's, yeah, so hopefully she'll find us soon or and can join us. So I'm just gonna let the at the end of this presentation, everyone will have an opportunity to participate in asking questions and providing comments. And so you can either keep track of your thoughts in the chat, or you can just privately keep track of the things you want to discuss. Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to the panel.
So part of what initiated our work in this is a driving question that came actually from Olivia's research, and something that she and I talked about in depth during the 2021 school year. And that was, how can supervisors bridge the theories taught in the credential coursework and the policies and practices that candidates and mentors encounter in the field to better prepare candidates to engage in anti-racist teaching? And so with that in mind, we put together a presentation to try to look at things in 3 different parts. First of all, we just want to look at the structures and the mission of both Anaheim Elementary School District and UCI. We wanted Olivia to have the opportunity to present her very in-depth research. And then we wanted to give an opportunity to share what we thought were some of the implications, and then to have an opportunity for you all as supervisors and lecturers and just participants in our community to think about the implications for your own work.
All right, and then our working definition of what anti-racist teaching is the active process of identifying and eliminating racism by changing education systems, organizational structures, policies and practices, and attitudes so that power is redistributed and shared equitably.
Okay, so in this first part, hi, I'm Julie Klinkenberg. I teach 4th grade in Anaheim. In this first part, we're going to be looking at how each institution, both UCI and our elementary school district, and our roles within them help support Olivia in to pursue her social justice mission. And basically, as the classroom teacher, I was the host, I was her mentor, and I was just the guide on the side.
So UCI's MAT program is a 14-month program, and our program is centered around 5 core values, and one of them is equity. And the courses that heavily emphasize diversity, equity, and inclusion are highlighted in pink, and you can see how they are interwoven throughout the coursework. During the entering summer courses, we begin by examining how education policies from the founding of this country have largely excluded, can you hear me? Have largely excluded marginalized groups based on race, gender, class, and disability. And then in summer session 2, we examine how those policies continue to play out at the federal, state, and local levels in today's education system. Then in the fall and winter courses, our students look at special education policies and how to design lessons based on UDL principles to ensure that the students with special needs are provided with adequate class in the history and social studies methods, social justice standards into lesson planning, which coursework and in their field work with their super. They wrap up the program by examining legal issues that currently grant or limit students' rights in education, what our ethical responsibilities are as educators and then how to engage in. Sorry, next slide.
Yeah, I've got the next slide
Can you
up.
hear me?
So last year at this very conference, Dr. Tyrone Howard from UCLA stressed that there was a sort of a dual tsunami facing us, and it was the struggle around social justice fueled by the deaths of Breonna Taylor and George Floyd and too many other people, and the kind of mounting catastrophe that was the pandemic. And that led me as Olivia's supervisor, and like I think so many of you, to really kind of examine and redouble my efforts on how to model and support anti-racist teaching. I tried to work with candidates in a new way and reform my relationship to education. And I just wanted to share really briefly that I tried to emphasize becoming a co-learner myself. I audited Dr. Young's course on culture, diversity, and educational equity, which gave me this unique opportunity to start participating with the candidates as actual learners. I really tried to, in the courses that I was instructing, center social justice standards and the issue of social justice as part of assignments. And then I really spent my time as Olivia's supervisor, really working on an in-depth co-planning and co-constructing knowledge effort. And I really felt my role change from being an evaluator to a thought partner. And I think those things combined were very powerful for us as a team.
Piggybacking on what Laura said, as the classroom teacher, I too was doing my own learning, never knowing that this accidental magic was going to happen when Olivia was placed into my 4th grade classroom. I wanted to share that I am representing myself, Julie Klinkenberg, not my school district. However, I do feel blessed and empowered to be in a forward-thinking and kind of a future-driven school district. One of the best things that's happened in the last few years is they've made social emotional learning one of the 3 focus areas. And along with that comes social justice and restorative practices and all the good things that just for humanity we should be keeping in the forefront. But this slide sort of serves as the rationale and the justification for Olivia and her research. And if historical documents like the Declaration of Independence and the US Constitution and CTPEs, and then throw in the FAIR Act and our history and social studies framework, if that's not enough rationale, I really don't know what to do more for you, but I like to think of this as a proper placement, like all of the pieces were in place. It was a good fit. We were able to create that brave space for both Olivia and our students.
Thank you, Julie. So now what we want to do, and I just want to say I was really excited when Olivia agreed to share, and Julie, because I think what's unique about our panel is the idea that we're looking at all the different parts of this process of having a young person go from entering into the program until their job. So Olivia, I'd love for you to be able to share your research with us.
Yes, absolutely. So a bit of context and background about the research that I did. This was conducted in Anaheim Elementary School District at the Anaheim Elementary Online Academy, as Julie said, with our 4th graders, and there were 29 of them. And due to COVID, our school was brand new, and parents were able to choose right around August of 2020 for various reasons if they wanted their children to be online. So we were online the entire year, and I'm pretty sure they will continue to be doing so. And the content focus, we wanted to combine ELA, social studies, and the social justice standards to implement an anti-racist teaching unit, which is what ultimately led me to my chosen implementation. And a bit of background on our students. The majority of our students identified as people of color. Approximately 1/3 were AAPI, 1/3 were Latinx, and 1/3 identified with 2 or more ethnicities. And since I began my journey at UCI, less than 1 month after the murder of George Floyd and 3 months after the murder of Breonna Taylor, the topic of racial justice was really fresh on everyone's mind. And I didn't want to be another complicit white person who got in the cycle of racial advocacy, and then eventually the white apathy kicked in. So I decided that if I was able to do research at the university, I wanted to make sure I was doing it on this to actually make some change. And I wanted to challenge or explore the notion, rather, that elementary school age children are too young to discuss racism in the classroom. Ultimately, I wanted to see if the students were the ones who were unprepared and uncomfortable, or if it was for the adults speaking on behalf of the children. So I thought I'd just ask them. And that led me to my driving question. So how might reading the diverse historical fiction novel One Crazy Summer with my 4th grade students impact their ability to have racially literate discussions in the classroom as measured by Pear Deck responses, video recordings, and field observations? Moving into my intervention in research design. So I essentially had 7 read alouds of the novel One Crazy Summer. And if you're not familiar with this book, it's a wonderful book. I can't recommend it enough. It essentially details the experiences of an 11-year-old girl named Delphine who travels to Oakland, California with her 2 younger sisters to meet their estranged mother, who they discover is a member of the Black Panther Party. This book offers a multitude of organic opportunities for classroom discussions that fit right into an anti-racist curriculum. And I was exposed to this novel with the help of Laura, obviously. And we had almost like an anti-racism book club in our class. And so I found this book because of her and thought, oh my gosh, this is perfect. And so I talked to my professor, Jody, who was helping us with our research. And she said, yeah, you could totally double down and use it for both. So that is another tip that we'll talk about later, about exposing your candidates to this material, because it quite literally changed the course of my research and my journey at the university. So essentially I documented for UCI 7 sessions of this, but this was about over a month that we spent on this book because I wanted them to read the entire book. And the students essentially listened to a read aloud of the story. None of them had to purchase the book. I was just on Microsoft Teams with them, reading to them every day. And we would do 2 chapters a day. And then the students were connected to a Pear Deck where they would answer questions that would be used in our whole class discussion. And so the data I collected came in the form of initial and final survey responses on Google Forms, as well as video recordings and field notes. So moving into our student survey data, you can see here, I asked the students, do you think it's important that we discuss social justice in the classroom? I kept hearing that students weren't ready or didn't want to, and I thought, well, has anyone actually asked them what they think? So I wanted to see what they thought. And you can see here, it's the majority of yes. Many of them, there were dozens of answers, but most of them follow the lines of, like, even though we are young, I think we should learn about these things like racism, social justice, and body image. I also did eating disorder prevention with them as well. So they were loaded up on all these topics, and they did very well because you can see here that this is clearly very valuable to them. So if you have a candidate that is not sure that they should, or they want to, but they don't know where to start, ask your kids, ask their students, because it gives you something to walk into that meeting with maybe an angry parent or administrator. If you can say, well, this is what the kids are wanting, why aren't we giving it to them? And so it gives you a lot of power in that dynamic versus it's being maybe interpreted that you are forcing this on the kids, when in reality, it's something that they are quite literally asking for. And then moving on to my next slide, more student survey data. After we finished reading the book, I asked them if they liked learning about social justice while reading the book. And you can see that the majority of them just said yes. A few said somewhat, and only I think 3 of them said they did not. So if only 10% are saying this is not for me, that's a pretty solid number. So you can see that the majority of our 4th graders really did enjoy this book and learning about social justice. Moving on to our next slide. So I asked them, how did it feel talking about racism and discrimination in the story? And I gave them a variety of options to choose from. They could select more than one, all of them, it was up to them. And you can see the majority said it felt safe to talk about. I learned a lot from the story and from my classmates. The second most popular was it was hard to hear. but I think these topics are important to learn about. And then you have a chunk that said it just felt okay. And we only had one student who said, I did not like it at all. It made me uncomfortable. But I know that this student also checked that it felt safe to talk about. So maybe he was a bit conflicted, duality of emotions. And then after I got this data, I really wanted to survey my classmates, so my cohorts in the MAT program, to see how pre-service teachers were feeling about it, besides me, obviously. And so I asked them, do you think, I asked them to agree or disagree with the statement, I think social justice is important in the classroom. And you can see here, nobody said no. We only had a few that were neutral with that statement, but the majority strongly agree or agree with the statement. So you can see that within teacher candidates, they do think it's an important topic and it's something that kids should learn about. But you'll see in the next slide, okay, well, how many of you are actually doing it? And so this data was a bit striking, comparing the level of interest. So I asked them, have you been able to engage in an anti-racist education lesson more than once at your placement site? And we're not counting Black History Month. We're not talking about Martin Luther King Jr. one time and saying, check. That was not what I wanted people to count as valid experience. So it had to be twice outside of February. And only 22% of my classmates did that. So going from 92% saying, yeah, this is really important. Well, only 22% are jumping off the bench and doing it. And it was even more striking when we were going over this data is that I thought the majority of the responses would be, I wanted to, but didn't know where to start, or I wanted to, but my mentor or district disapproved. You can see that the majority of people just said, no, I haven't, which was a bit alarming. So the desire clearly didn't transfer over to this data set, which was surprising. So that led me to ultimately develop my learning statements. On the next slide here. So after I finished this research, this is what I came up with ultimately. Number one, students are prepared to discuss racism and discrimination in the classroom with the support of a teacher informed of racially literate teaching strategies. And number two, students want to discuss social justice concepts and ideas in the classroom, as I showed with my data. And number three, students are more likely to share their lived experiences and participate more when they are asked questions that require them to empathize with others. And then furthermore, I have my implications of my research. So ultimately, this study revealed that elementary school students are prepared to discuss these topics, contrary to a narrative that's being tossed around. You can see that in the response to critical race theory, and we'll get into that in a second with Dr. Young. But yes, they are prepared when the teacher is trained in these strategies. Even in my data set, the student said, I think it's important if the teacher's doing it right. So this is definitely a shared notion among the students as well. And because the study has shown that elementary school age children are not only prepared to discuss race and racism at school, but that many feel it's important to do so. So adults in the educational realm may need to address their own bias and beliefs that may not be based on the children as much as it is their own shared discomfort. And ultimately why we're here today, our third point, pre-service teachers and teacher educators must be equipped with anti-racist teaching strategies to prevent further harm to students of color and perpetuating systems of inequity in schools. I will be continuing to implement these strategies as I begin my teaching career this fall in Santa Ana Unified. And I'm looking forward to testing it out on different age groups and demographics as well. And then I think we're leading into part 3 with Laura in a second.
Right. So first of all, I just want to thank Olivia for agreeing to come and share her knowledge and her data with us as supervisors and people in programs. And I want to also really thank Evelyn and Julie for their mentorship and sharing of Brave Spaces. And I think what would be really important is if we could just take a few minutes here to share what we consider to be a little bit of our recipe for success, and then reach out to the community to ask you all to share what tips, strategies, things that are working, or challenges that you're feeling within your own university communities.
So thank you. I know you had a lot of good choices. We're really glad you joined us, but I just kind of wanted to summarize this slide as the classroom teacher. I know we can't say it enough. It starts with relationships. And I think because Olivia's research and her novels unit was successful, as we had relationships from the university level all the way to the, teacher candidate level, and also with our families. We were transparent. The parents knew we were going to be reading this novel. I would recommend being intentional in everything you do, because you want to, you don't want there to be any space for conspiracy or any of those negative vibes. So the grownups at home knew what we were doing. Like you saw in Olivia's survey, the kids were all in. Being intentional. It doesn't have to be a novel study. It doesn't have to be this big, long 7-week unit. Anything you're doing, whether it's icebreakers or relationship, team building, inclusions, keep your equity and social justice lens on, so you see all the students in your classroom. Don't just say, oh, well, how am I going to make, how do I make time? What are you going to do to make the time for this?
So after I surveyed the UCI candidates, I asked them, what are some ways that the UCI courses could better prepare pre-service teachers to be anti-racist educators? Do you think that they missed any crucial concepts or ideas? And so these are some suggestions that were submitted that I thought were really, really insightful and valuable. And they also this is ways that supervisors can basically support their candidates to do this work. Require us to teach a lesson in our student placement, so that we will be aware of how students will react as a whole class and individually. So essentially that would make it less about theory and more about real life events. That was a common theme in our answers, was that the university was doing great at providing why it's important, the research on it, but was lacking a little bit in terms of the implementing of these strategies. And so essentially getting off the bench. Let's see. Yes, practicing what we preach, having the tools, but we need a chance to use them. Yes, we have read articles about them, but it would be helpful to hear from other educators' experiences. And there's some more on the next slide. Yes, so this one student said, I would have liked to seen videos of anti-racist teaching lessons. So even if you have a school, let's say, that is like, no, absolutely not, we're not going to be talking about that, that's not appropriate, whatever. So even if they're not getting this experience at their placement because it's just absolutely impossible, watching videos of discussions or having mock discussions in your classes where students pretend to be, they could be given a role. You could be Jimmy that, doesn't believe that racism is a thing. And so even just playing in that can be helpful to apply this theory and put it into some form of practice. So that way the students could have some helpful, tangible skills as they're entering the field. Okay, and then we're going to be hearing from Dr. Young in just a second, all about critical race theory.
Okay, so thank you, Olivia and Julie, for sharing the research that you've done and how you implemented ELA lesson that focused on anti-racism. And, as we go back into the classroom, this is a topic that we can no longer avoid. You hear critical race theory in the news, you hear it in social media, you hear it everywhere. It's the big elephant in the room. And as educators, we need to know how to respond to parents and faculty and students who are very opposed to this idea of introducing critical race theory into the classroom. So what I've put together here is a series of slides about what the myths of critical race theory are, and then also what some truths are. Now we hear lots of different things about what it is, and some of the myths, like one common myth is that we hear critical race theory teaches whites to be ashamed of their skin color. No such thing. Critical race theory is not about shaming people. In fact, it embraces diversity and it is deeply rooted in the equity of all people. Myth number 2 is that it teaches anti-American values. Now, critical race theory fights for the rights of all Americans to be treated with equality. It is not a fight to overthrow the government. Myth number 3, it seeks to, sorry, I keep saying my internet is unstable. Can you hear me? Okay, so myth number 3, it seeks to divide people based on color lines. No, critical race theory seeks to unite people across color lines. And the only people who are divisive about this issue are people who are willfully colorblind and they fear that they have something to lose. And myth number 4, it argues that whites need to atone for their sins of their forefathers. No one is asking anyone to personally give up their property or their paycheck. Yes, structural changes need to take place. We need more diverse representations in politics and upper, so that laws and policies are justly made for all people groups. And if giving up seats in powerful positions causes any one of us angst, just think how much angst it causes those who feel powerless every day. Laura, next slide. So some truths about critical race theory. 1, critical race theory is rooted in a critical analysis of the Declaration of Independence in the Constitution. Critical race theory came about when a group of Harvard Law grad students analyzed these documents and saw that 1, they were inequitable by design because it left out half of the population and it counted slaves as 3/5 of the person. And 2, the very ideals of freedom, democracy, equality, the unalienable rights to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, and the right to due process and equal opportunities was a sham for people of color throughout the course of American history. Next slide. 2, we need to recognize the history of racism and its continued effects on BIPOCs today. I included here some quotes from primary documents related to Europeans' negative perceptions of indigenous people and how it has had a detrimental effect on nation tribes over the centuries. The first quote here speaks of Europeans' views of indigenous people as of the devil who deserve to be dashed, meaning killed if necessary. And the second is Red Jacket's account of how his people were being destroyed and their land was increasingly being taken. And the third is a report on the condition of Indian boarding schools where children were taken from their homes at the age of 6 and placed in institutions where food was deficient, diseases were rampant, and child labor were practiced, and death was not uncommon. And the last is a current study on the high mortality rates, poor health, suicide, drug and alcohol abuse, depression, sexual violence due to centuries of trauma on Native populations. And this is just one example of the decimation of a group of people based on racism. And you can easily trace the history and trauma of racism to other groups of color and its effects on them today. So this slide here, truth number 3, healing begins with a recognition of our own roles in perpetuating racial injustices. Looking at these pictures, let's face it, we have a history of segregation, segregated neighborhoods, segregated public facilities, segregated schools. Whenever people of color intrude upon white people's domain, the fists come out and the racial slurs start spewing. And now we look at these pictures and today we would say, oh, I would never. But how different is the protest against the integration of critical race theory into schools? What are people trying to out? What are we really afraid of? The truth? Against the teaching of multicultural education in schools made the exact same arguments that multiculturalists only see the bad in Western culture, or in other words, they're anti-American, that Western tradition is inherently racist, sexist, classist, hegemonic, and it is irredeemably repressive and oppressive. Multicultural education is now widely accepted in schools today as a way to embrace diversity, to see color, and to recognize students' cultural assets. Has the world come to an end because we have adopted multicultural education? Critical race theory is no different, and we will become. Okay, truth number 4. Lastly, one can love one's people and one's country at the same time. When we see athletes kneel or people protest against police brutality, sorry, internet is unstable. It doesn't make them less American. All that they're fighting for is what the founding fathers fought for freedom from injustice, right to representation, and a democratic government of the people, by the people, for the people. Critical race theory doesn't divide us, it unites us toward a common purpose in the pursuit of equality. So that's just a really quick overview of critical race theory, and it gives you a, some kind of a tool to be able to say to other mentor teachers and student teachers when you face these criticisms about critical race theory, use these slides, use these points, challenge the myths, and espouse the truth so that they know that critical race theory is not meant to be divisive, it's not meant to shame people, it is meant to unite people toward a common purpose, toward equality.
Thank you so much, Dr. Young. I mean, we could see the chat. I feel very lucky that she got to be my professor before I went out into the field. I think this was kind of instrumental. I heard all of this all summer and I was on fire, ready to go by the time I hit my placement. So very, very lucky to have her. And to my mentor, Julie and Laura, you all have been insanely wonderful, and I feel very grateful to be here with you today. Trying to wrap up and tie in CRT and my research. So using the Anti-Racist Book Club, and again, like Julie said, this is not a one-size-fits-all. There are a multitude of ways you can do this, but the method that I chose was the Anti-Racist Book Club. I was able to take on various scenarios throughout the book and ask students questions centered in critical race theory. And our favorite one was, who benefited from this and who was harmed? So that was a really, really powerful line of questioning that allowed the students to become critical thinkers and go, oh my goodness, that's really not fair. You see repeatedly that one type of person is really benefiting from all of this. And so at 9 years old, to make that connection is pretty powerful. And a specific question I asked them was, why would the news media paint what the Black Panthers were doing in an untrue fashion? Again, who's benefiting from that? Who's being harmed by that notion? So they're examining topics like the media and the news circuit in the 4th grade, which I think the more that we can expose them to in that way, the better. Essentially, I used critical race theory style questioning. In addition to providing students with primary sources, PBS was probably my favorite one, that supported what was happening along with the plot in the story. In addition, with Anaheim Elementary School District social emotional learning curriculum, asking students to empathize with other characters or real life people was extremely helpful, I must say. So I would ask questions like, how did it feel to be Hirohito's dad when his dad got arrested and didn't break the law? And so then why would somebody put someone in jail when they didn't break the law? So you're getting all these really wonderful opportunities to have these discussions without sitting in front of the board and saying, oh, we're going to talk about this today. It happened very naturally. And I actually found that social emotional learning and critical race theory pair very well together. Like Evelyn said, we're trying to connect each other and find strength in our differences. And so that was really, really helpful to come together and do. And I would highly recommend that other teacher candidates do so, and that their supervisors really encourage that. I thought it was very, very valuable.
So really quickly, and this is just a handful of probably a dozen or more learnings that we came away with from last year that we wanted to share. One, we really think it's important to have developed really strong student contacts where we're looking at an assets-based rather than a deficit-based look at our students, survey our children, get to know our children well so that we have those trusting relationships. We really think that having video case study and role play obviously is critical in what our candidates ask. We need to assign social emotional learning, social justice standards. It needs to be part of the lesson planning. It needs to be centered, not as this sort of side piece. And then we as supervisors can really be addressing bias during the observation cycle, both our own and the candidates. And we think that that can really be done by leaning heavily into TPE 6. So I want to be mindful of time. We wanted to give you all some time to work in breakout rooms to talk about this. So here's a process or procedure that we have set up for people. We are going to ask you to go in a breakout room and introduce yourselves really quickly. We then we'll put the complete text of TPE 6 into the chat for people to pull up. This will give you the opportunity to see how TPE 6 in your role as supervisors can really be used as a tool or a help in your discussions with candidates. And then we have a couple questions that we'd love to have you think about, reflect on a lesson plan or observation and how you use TPE 6 or critical race theory or other tools to address social justice. Given the clear need that candidates are expressing, what can you do to take your work to the next level? And then, and this is, I think, helpful for all the programs, what training and tools, what support do you need as supervisors to take your work to the next level?